So we're about to start shortly. Gonna wait for people to join in. But we already have the speakers here. Hello, Dina. Hello, Joy. Good to have you both here. We'll do full introductions. We're going to start off fully in a few moments, but I can see that people joining in. So how you guys are doing today?
So
Oh,
far, so
great.
good.
I'm great for
Starting the
this
day.
rainy, dreary morning, right? I think we were just talking about that. It's rainy, dreary here in Atlanta, that kind of sleep in, relaxing weather. So
Right.
um, it, it's not too bad, but yes, it's great to be here.
It's so funny. I told you I traveled. I live in Atlanta, but traveled here to North Carolina, and the weather was perfect yesterday, and then today rain. I'm like, I thought I
Yes.
left rain in Atlanta, and you know what tomorrow's weather is? Blue skies. I'm like, seriously?
Really?
And that's when you're leaving,
Wow.
right?
I'll actually be here until Sunday. So
Okay,
this
so at
this is
least
the
you get
only
to enjoy
day.
the weather.
Yeah, this is
Well,
the
I
only day
hope
that
that
wants to rain.
Well, I hope those blue skies are going to be here in Atlanta the rest of the week because, this weather change, it's been flip flopping back and forth and it's driving me
Yes,
nuts.
it has. You don't know what season to dress for, and that's in one day. So
Right.
it's
Yeah,
something.
I mean, I cannot complain, to be honest. I'm based out of Los Angeles, and it's slightly chilly,
Oh,
but it's beautiful. I can see the hills, Hollywood sign, and like in a
Yeah, I
movie.
see all that nice sunny or at least
Yeah,
right,
bright light that you have.
natural light coming in.
right. And we have the doom and gloom behind us, so I had to close the curtains. Like, let me make sure.
I know. I
And
just dumped myself in the office here, and of course, there's no windows at all, but that's probably
Oh,
better.
wow. Yeah, probably.
as people joining in, just wanted to say as well for everyone, feel free to start asking questions in Q&A box, and then throughout the whole webinar, we'll be tracking those and obviously picking the questions and asking Dina and Joy to chip in as well. So hopefully we'll have a lot of good questions coming in, and we'll just give probably a couple more moments before we start off, so I can still see people actively joining in. It's a hot topic. So
Wait, there's a lot of hot topics
Yes,
nowadays.
100%.
Yes,
absolutely.
security and compliance, though, yeah, I would say are definitely big on the list, top of the list.
Hmm.
And I don't think that they're ever going to go away, to be
Oh
honest.
no, they're necessary.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, it'll
Yes.
probably it'll just get bigger and bigger.
Right. They'll expand based on, business needs, business growth, and just a changing culture, really, that we have, So I just can imagine years from now, it'll be totally different.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that, I know we'll get into it, but I'll say it anyway. I think that's the biggest thing that we need to also realize, just in general across the board. Change is inevitable. We've been
Yes.
saying it for years and years and years. I remember back in the day when I read that book, Who Moved My Cheese, and
Hmm.
change is inevitable. But I think we forget that and think that in some areas, it doesn't matter what area, right? We think that they're still going to be very static or not move much, right? But now we're seeing that everything is changing, and no matter
Absolutely.
what, you've got to be able to adapt to that change and start to literally think about, hey, this is my space is no longer the same, and how do I think outside that box and really
Yep.
focus on like what else could actually impact. Really think about, what's impacting you today, so what could possibly come at you next.
Hmm.
Just
It
really
takes
Absolutely.
just
one big compelling event for change to happen, and those compelling events, no matter how destructive they may seem, those are tend to be good for the industries in long term, especially. So change is always good, I say, especially in compliance and cybersecurity. But I'll probably say we could start. We're 5 minutes in. I can see a lot of people joining in. So no surprise to people joining in and to everyone here. So we going to be covering a big topic today. We're going to talk about compliance trends. So we'll touch a bit on previous year, on 2022, but we'll focus mostly on 2023 and beyond. So around the risk management strategies around compliance is the big trends, what happened last year, and obviously how can we prepare to be better as businesses moving into this year and beyond. So we have seen many businesses experience different consequences for non-compliances in the past year. And so obviously the global forecast of regulations of data protection only becoming stricter. And you ladies just mentioned that also. And our aim is to help businesses stay ahead, be prepared, start thinking about it a lot more. And the compliance is that topic that should definitely be on top of everyone's minds, especially for the leaders in the organization. So we've seen that obviously stricter regulations does make it slightly more consumer transparent, and it's one of the bigger trends now globally. And even small and medium businesses do get exposed to it, and they have to comply with those legislations. So we're not talking about just large enterprises that would have to comply to different regulations that do get set by governing bodies globally. And non-compliance can cause huge disruptions to the organizations and issues. And we've seen many different aspects of that happening over the last year or so. And that could be damages, that could be even jail time in some circumstances. So of course, business do want to be on top of that and avoid it. So we today gather here, and NordPass organized a great panel discussion here with these two ladies. And obviously we are hoping that after today's conversation, everyone listening here will be able to walk away with understanding the roadmap around the compliances, around bigger trends coming in, and be more prepared this year and beyond. So I'll start with short introductions, who the speakers are today. I'll read it off because the CV is actually impressive. So I don't want to miss anything on it. So in no particular order, so I'm going to start with Dina Swartzy. She's a Senior Vice President, Cybersecurity Strategy and Digital Innovation at Truist. So Dina is a cybersecurity leader at Truist Financial with over 20 years of experience in cybersecurity and risk management. Currently, she's responsible for enterprise cybersecurity strategy with the objective of continually maturing and transforming the cybersecurity program. And interestingly enough, Dina's career has spanned across different segments, so financial services, management, consulting, and airline industry, which is impressive, and with a focus on strategy, governance, compliance, identity, and access and project management. She also enjoys contributing her time and talent and resources to the profession by presenting on various topics and conference and seminars. Thank you for being here today. And she's also a member of the Project Management Institute, ISAC, on board now. So pleasure to have you here today, Dina. And obviously now let's talk about the second speaker quickly. So Joy Bryan, she's a GRC Privacy Technology Analyst at RNSC Technologies. Joy Bryan is performance-driven professional with over 15 years of experience in leadership and operations, business continuity, and project management. So Joy's passion for cybersecurity awareness led her to fully transition into cybersecurity industry over the past few years. So definitely a great transition here, I see, following with the trends of the market. Completing continuing education studies at Emory University led to a purposeful focus on governance, risk, compliance, and business continuity, all integrating with her diversified background. Joy currently serves as GRC Privacy Technology Analyst with RNSC SC Technologies, where she focuses on strategically executing cybersecurity program development and policy deployment and development. Joy is equally passionate about courses that educate and empower underserved women and children. This moved her to serve on the leadership team of BGH as Director of Community Outreach and Engagement to introduce others to cybersecurity as a life-changing career path. So very impressive, I would say, and I love the transitions, and I think we can see on both of you as well, which probably will go into the topics today as well, how that transition even within your career paths moved more and more into where the actual market is heading. So again, thank you, Joy, thank you, Dina, for being here and spending this hour to share your vast experience and knowledge with us today. So probably without any further ado, I'm just going to start and let's focus on a bit on the previous year. So I think for myself and the audience here today, it's interesting to find out what factors have actually influenced businesses last year, and what were the biggest challenges and lessons that we took away and we learned, or maybe we haven't, from last year. So maybe, Joy, if you'd like to start with that.
Okay, sure. I think, again, thank you for having me on this panel today. Excited to be here. I pretty much kind of narrowed it down to the top 3 factors that I would consider had a great impact last year. Cybersecurity being the top of that list. So many we still are dealing with social engineering and ransomware at a rapid rate. Last year alone, just the top half of 2022, we had 236 million ransomware attacks that were reported. That's a massive number, and that impacts the business at great lengths. I mean, the impacts of that are seen for years to come sometimes if an organization didn't have certain compliance initiatives in place. I also felt like last year we were dealing with a very volatile job market, which also attributed to a lot of the compliance related issues. We're still dealing with the long effects of COVID. People are still, resigning at great rates, and as well as the layoffs that we're seeing, especially in tech. I mean, just this year alone, we're only not even through January yet, and already thousands have been laid off. That's a massive impact to the business. And then lastly, in terms of another factor, the supply chain. Last year, when we saw the invasion of Ukraine with Russia, that actually caused a lot of disturbances in the business world from a vendor relationship standpoint. It was very risky to continue doing business with organizations that were affiliated with that. So it put a lot of due diligence on companies to try to mitigate that. That was an unexpected event. So in terms of challenges, I think some of the biggest challenges from last year, number one is cyber resiliency. Being able to deliver continuous countermeasures and having key risk and compliance measures in place. That is a huge challenge. And as you mentioned, for small businesses as well, I mean, it can be devastating, in certain instances, they may not be able to recover, so it's a huge factor. Also, business resiliency. It's amazing to me that in this day, we still have businesses that do not have an active business continuity or disaster recovery plan. And if they have one, it's minimally managed. Why is this important? Because it's a co-partner with compliance initiatives. They work together. You have to have both in order to have effective measures put in place. Another challenge, again, is just about securing the workforce. Last year, and then as we continue in years to come, people are still working remotely, or we have these hybrid roles or policies where people can bring their own device. That makes it very complex for not only securing devices and securing your networks, but also keeping up with compliance and how we handle the data remotely and how we handle data, in a hybrid role. So I would hope that in terms of lessons learned, that it allowed businesses to be a little bit more proactive in their approach and in their strategies. And I bring up business continuity a lot in disaster recovery because they are so important and they're key when you're talking about compliance. They are co-partners. And so they're just critical factors in ensuring an organization is compliant and up to date on relevant regulations. So that's my thoughts on, that question. Sorry for that was a little long, but
No, absolutely,
I
Joy.
was gonna say,
And
Joy, you said it all.
I'm sorry. I was just trying to
be
be
honest,
intentional.
the topics you touched on, I think one thing that comes to my mind as well as a business leader is overwhelming, right? So the business leaders could easily get overwhelmed. Last year alone was massive year of economic uncertainties. What is happening in Ukraine, and then obviously business resilience itself, disaster recovery plans, and that's always been obviously on the what should have been on the roadmap, and things just going sideways from there. Also, with all the uncertainties, especially for smaller organizations where they firstly might not have the resources or even the staff to fully support it, and let alone with having to maybe let some staff go. Dina, do you have anything to add, perhaps around the lessons we learned from that, or the lack of it sometimes due to so many things happening in one year?
I will tell you, from me, and I agree with Joy wholeheartedly. Like everything she said, I mean, she hit it on the nose with everything that has transpired over the last year. But it's not even just the last year; it's the last few years. We have seen such an enormous amount of change. We've been impacted by things so unexpectedly that we don't know how to react to them, and so we're so used to just reacting to a normal audit or a regulatory request or a compliance request that we are not getting outside of our box to understand that the world is changing, our environment is changing, and so is our technology. So we need to start to plan better. We need to start to think better and think ahead and be more proactive. I think that was really one of the biggest things about me shifting from a role from GRC into the strategy area was because you get to be more proactive. You get to think about what's going on, and then how would it impact you, and then start to think beyond that, right? And I pushed my team to do that, just thinking beyond just what we need to do from a standard, right? And that way you get ahead of things. You're not going to always be ahead. Cybercrime is always going to be up. Third party management is always going to be an issue. There's always going to be something new. Like you mentioned, Ukraine, who expected that to happen last year, right? So you're never going to always know. But if you continuously just make sure that you plan, you encourage your teams to perform normal security hygiene. Normal security hygiene is like the one that's the most important. If you are continuously really keeping up with your security hygiene and planning each year, getting outside that box and not just checking a box, I think you'll be a little bit more prepared, so it doesn't feel like such a big hit. I've seen that even like when we talk about talent and workforce, everyone's immediate response, so we need more resources. You don't always necessarily need more resources. It's really about balancing and understanding what are those requirements. So if the requirements are not really, if they overlap, right? Security and compliance is going to overlap a lot. If you start to collaborate with both teams and really start to implement what's best for your business, I think you'll come out ahead. And again, just really planning ahead for that. None of this is going to go away. I think we were talking earlier, just saying that it's going to continue to evolve. Cybercrime is going to continue to increase. The hackers are continuously out there trying to find new creative ways to get to data. And so data to me is one of the biggest things that we need to always really constantly keep our eyes on. It's especially with all the compliance requirements now and the compliance and agencies. If we don't get ahead of how we manage data and where that data goes for our clients, then we're truly doing ourselves a disservice. So that's I think that's the one most important place where I think we need to spend the most time with in general.
Absolutely. And there's one saying I heard once as well, talking about data, is that data is 21st century oil. where being able to understand that data and manage it, know where it is, and be in control of it. So that's definitely a big aspect of it. I do have one question that I think touches into what we're discussing also from the audience. Obviously, we saw the hybrid workspace itself evolve, and first businesses got hit with it, and then last year everyone kind of adapted into it. But we have a question asking around the certain industries who found themselves more at risk by having that hybrid working employees. What do you think? Are there certain industries more exposed to it than others, where it could be seen as a risk rather than a good thing?
I think that that's a possibility, but I think it really does just depend on the industry, and their particular, business posture. I mean, I think risk is always going to be there, whether you're in a hybrid role, remote. I mean, they each come with their own different, unique set of nuances. And they come with their own certain types of risk factors. So, and it just depends. Is this a small business? Is it a larger enterprise? I think it's hard to just give a blanketed answer to that, for me anyway, because I think there's so many other factors that would go into that. So that's my take. I don't know, Dean, if you have something different or.
Well, Joy, I think you're right. I mean, I don't think it's industry specific. I really think it boils down to the controls that you have in place. And I think it surprised a lot of us when the pandemic hit, because you didn't have a lot of controls. And again, going back to security, hygiene, right? But if you don't have the controls in place, then it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you're going to have those gaps, and there's going to be those holes where hackers can get in. So I think it's not industry specific. I think it's just really about making sure that you have the proper controls in place to make sure that you're managing your business wisely. Whatever your critical assets are, and small businesses to large, medium to large, whatever your critical assets are, that's where you need to start first. If you start there, it could be just maybe a small number of critical assets, but if you start there, at least that way from a security standpoint that you've at least protected that much, right? And so then the risks
absolutely
are not as high. I won't say they don't exist, but they're not as high. That's what's most important.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's industry specific. I agree with Joy, though. There's a lot of different areas, but not necessarily industry specific.
Okay.
Thank you. So I think the biggest bulk of conversation here, I want to focus on actually this year and beyond. So I like to get the predictions for 2023 and beyond. What new challenges should compliance professionals expect and prepare for? Where the market is leading to. We have lessons from last year, the year before, but what can we apply? How does this year look? What should we sort of take away from this?
Joy, do you want to go, or you want? I'm happy to jump.
I'm leaving the freedom. Whoever wants to start first. But
it doesn't matter. You can go first, Dina. That's fine, and then I can come back on. After that.
I mean, I would say, again, going back to what we were already talking about, I don't think you're going to get away from third party, and I definitely don't think you're going to get away from data. Those are two key areas. I think there's going to be a heavier emphasis on third party now, because where we didn't really know, we had that blind spot with them. Now I think we're going to start to dig deeper into, their business practices, understanding how they're handling and managing our data and our processes. So I think you're going to see a heavier emphasis there. I think you're going to see more compliance requirements that are going to come out across the board. I mean, you see that there's different states that are having, that have all these different requirements. You may see more. I think you're going to see more. I would start to, based on that, I would start to really plan to understand if you're able to address all of the compliance concerns for all of the regulatory agencies today, if you can at least at a minimum there, start to foresee what else might be coming down the pipe. And it will probably be an easier overlay to kind of protect yourselves or at least meet those compliance requirements. But at the same time, balance that with that security. We're constantly going to see more and more hackers that are going to be trying to get access to your environment, to get to your data, to expose you, which is why I really feel like the compliance agencies are going to come down a little bit harder and more states are going to get more involved because that data is critical and that data is important. And consumers are really starting to get more educated around, understanding like, well, wait a minute, your company's been hacked and that's my personal data. And now they're starting to speak up a little bit more. So I think you're going to see a heavier emphasis there, but definitely on that third party as well. Those are the two key ones that that resonate with me the most, that are going to be very hot topics for 2023.
Yeah, I agree, Dina, with you. I think in terms of prediction, I think it's always funny when you have to use that word, but as we talked about, expect the unexpected. No one could have predicted last year that Ukraine would have been dealing with that. And it's continuing to happen today. I don't think anyone saw that coming. We should have that same mindset about the next few months, even before the end of January. We really just are not sure. So expect the unexpected. I think you're spot on when you're talking about there are going to be more stringent compliance requirements. I absolutely see that, especially as it relates to data and consumer protection. That's a huge issue because consumers are becoming, smarter in that area. They're becoming more aware. And they also understand that some of the implications for themselves could be monetary. You know what I mean? If certain things are not done correctly, there are fees and whatnot that are they're gonna happen. So consumers are getting smarter in that space, and they're gonna expect more. They're gonna hold companies accountable, and so that's why your compliance needs to be in place. You talked about different states. I definitely see that happening as well, especially. They're going to kind of follow suit with California, with the California Privacy Act. This year alone, I believe it's Virginia, Colorado, Utah, are also going to implement similar data protection laws. I think we'll start to see more states over the next few years eventually, jump on that bandwagon. And because it's important, I also feel like we are going to really see, speaking of consumers and them becoming more aware, I think ESG, environmental, social, and governance is going to take a huge part of compliance. And compliance professionals will begin to adopt that into their day-to-day, identifying risks, related to these issues to help mitigate them before these compliance issues arise. And then lastly, I think with the advancement of artificial intelligence, we're going to see a lot more of that begin to be integrated in our day-to-day mainstream tools that we're using. I believe that it's going to change the way that we work. It's going to help with efficiency. Yes, there will be some risks associated with it, but I believe even from a compliance professional standpoint, there are going to be several use cases where they're using these tools to help analyze data because, with this advanced AI, it can take large amounts of data and quickly help deliver a business solution, you know what I mean? At least to give a starting point. Whereas before it's, hours and hours of meetings and discussions and whatnot to try to get to that type of solution. So I think we're going to see more of that. Being used in the workspace, but also there's going to be some compliance, built into that. So it'll be interesting to see how that works.
So, Joe, to jump in here quickly, actually, this ties in with one of the questions that we got
Sure.
as well, and it is actually talking about artificial intelligence and such as GPT. We've seen that obviously growing
Yes.
recently as well,
Yes.
and we understand what you mentioned as well with artificial intelligence. The purpose of it is to actually collect data, to analyze that data, and to be able to perform better as an artificial intelligence. Ultimately, what that does, that collects my data as a potential customer of an organization, for instance. And the question was that, does that raise additional concerns for cybersecurity? I know the short answer would be yes, but
Right.
maybe to expand on that, what do you think? What additional concerns does that raise? What leaders should be focusing on if they decide to implement artificial intelligence tools or analytical tools, especially if talking about data management, about cloud data management? What do you have to add to that?
That's a really good question, especially as it relates to, as you mentioned, ChatGPT and the automation it provides. Absolutely, it does introduce risks. I do still believe if we're using these tools, it can't just be the only tool. It has to have some balances with, what's currently, the compliance and regulations that are existing today. How does that marry with what we know to be true? Yes, it will help jobs become easier. It could possibly eliminate certain types of positions and provide humans with more complex roles. But I just, and we will never not have risk be a factor when we're talking about these types of automations. What I do recommend is that if someone is considering it, go ahead and start playing with it now. There's no harm in just at least, not even from a business sense, just on a regular personal level, just get into the tool. And it's not just Chat GPT, there are others out there, but Chat GPT is definitely a very popular one. Get into it, start asking it questions, start, just kind of build up different use cases that you feel would be great for your business, and test it against the compliance programs that you have in place today to see, does this match up with what we're saying to be true on our end. It's definitely hands-on, and it's something that we're going to have more of that take place, because people like automation. We want to work smarter, not harder, if we can. So it will be a challenge in compliance, though, because it's going to be hard to keep up with the frequency of these changes and these tools that start to come out. But I definitely recommend, just starting to at least become comfortable with it, because we are going to see a lot more of that.
And I'm just going to jump in there. I'm going to jump in there just real quick, add a little bit more to what Joy was saying, as I agree with her completely. But I'm going to put my security hat on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now that you have more tools are great. They help to streamline and processes and make things more efficient. You definitely need that, right? But at the same time, you've got to look at what's going on with the data in these tools and how is it being secured. So, it's great to look at a lot of nice tools with all these bells and whistles, but make sure that their security features are also in place, because that will come back to haunt you too. Like, you can implement any tool you want to, but if you don't have those security controls in place, the questions that will come up next is, okay, so how's the data being stored? Again, right? Same questions. How's the data being, if it's being sent or transmitted anywhere, where that is and how it's being performed. So I think you have to think about all those things. One of the things that I always do in any of the work that I do involved in, I have to put on, if you've ever worked with auditors, put on your audit hat. We can talk about compliance, we can talk about security, but put on your audit hat where they ask all these questions, and they usually drive you nuts because they're asking so many questions, and you think, okay, well, I've satisfied and checked all these boxes, but really and truly what they're trying to do is just really make sure that everything has been covered. And if you can truly explain and walk through in detail why you're doing certain processes or how you're handling this data, I think it would be of value to you long term, because then now and you can identify where you might have some potential gaps. And again, like I said, I'm used to being heavily regulated and audited, so I've learned a lot from the auditors to know exactly what they're going to ask me before they ask me. So going back to what Joy said earlier, if you can be as proactive as possible, and it's hard in this environment today because we're constantly having to react to all these different situations. But in some kind of way, if you can try to get ahead of the game, or at least get to a point where you can be more proactive to start planning, and incorporating what you think is going to occur, at least that way it'll give you a head start, and to be able to at least head things off sooner than later.
Yeah, thank you, Dina. One thing I wanted to touch on also is actually the data protection, right? So we're talking about the data protection, whether it's going to be, us collecting data of our customers. And I think the big thing that's one of the questions that came up also, many organizations now, they do a massive level of outreach programs. And obviously that collects data of maybe not even their customers, but prospects itself. And the question was around the data protection of that. Is there something that companies should have in place? How? Because probably when it comes to compliances, right, we're looking at different governing bodies that will require different type of things, especially if we look at GDPR and we look at Europe, US might have different things in place also. But anything particular that those type of organizations that do massive outreach programs should focus on or be aware of when collecting that type of data?
Joy, I'm not sure about you, but I'm thinking that it doesn't really matter what type of organization, even if it is an outreach, you're still collecting data, personal data.
Right.
And so whenever you're collecting any kind of personal data, you should be concerned with how and where it's stored and how it's being utilized. So I don't think it matters either way. I think everyone, even like when we were talking earlier, it's not industry specific. You've got to look at what kind of data you're storing, and if it is personal information, then how do you need to comply for that?
Right. I completely agree. Because if you really look at the basis of all of the data protection laws out there, that's what it's about. It's talking about how are you collecting the data? How are you using it? Have you given your customers a chance to opt out if that's not, if they don't want to participate in that? So I think that is what matters. You know what I mean? You want to make sure that you're at least covering the big threes or the big fours or whatever those requirements are. But it does not matter, like Dina said, on the industry or whatnot. At the end of the day, all of these protection rules that are in place, they're basically saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
What are we doing with the data? Why are we collecting it? Where are we using it? Who are we sharing it with? And did we give the customer a choice? So it's all about consumer protection at the end of the day.
Yeah. And Joy, just in talking, and when you think about it, a lot of these companies, I think it's the smaller ones that are not as regulated, they may think that just because no one's over there knocking on your door and trying to look over your shoulder, that you're exempt from that. And I think that's what's important, is that everyone, doesn't matter what kind of business you're in, you should think about that, or at least make sure that whatever third party you're working with, if it's a small business that you're working with a third party, that they are concerned about that and that they have some controls in place. Because should anything ever come up, we've seen it on the news, like these hackers, they're targeting everyone. It doesn't matter, even though they primarily target a lot of financial industries, they will target a small business too. And if they shut you down and they expose that data, you still could be liable in some way. And so it just depends. You may not have, because you don't have those big names, right? It doesn't mean that you're exempt in any kind of way.
That's
absolutely
a good point. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh,
sorry,
I was
Joy.
just gonna. That's okay. That's okay. I was gonna add too. Like even with the California law, there's a section in there, I believe, that will allow you to go look back to 2022. So even though currently you like Dina said, you may not have anyone particularly saying you're out of compliance, but I believe these laws will be built so that you can go backwards and look at a snapshot in time and see if you were compliant in a particular space, and you still will be held accountable for, not being compliant. So I think we shouldn't get comfortable, just because, you don't have the people knocking at your door yet saying, hey, you haven't done X, Y, and Z. I think the accountability is what matters most. And you're going to be accountable for what's before you, but also there's going to be some accountability for snapshots back in time. I don't know how far back, that will take place, but I do believe that's going to be something to keep in mind for sure.
And then
That's
think of
an
yourself.
excellent point, Joy.
I'm sorry, Gerald, if you don't mind, one last point. Maybe consider yourself as the consumer. I mean, like, we're in this business environment now, and we're saying like what we would do to help the company, but think about yourself and what concerns you as the consumer. And I tell my friends, I mean, literally, I talk to my friends about security here and there, because I know it's not a interesting topic to them, but I do try to share certain techniques for them to stay safe, because they don't think about certain things. Naturally, you just don't think about it. You'll sign up with a company and provide them with all your info. And so even like my daughter is like very adamant now, Mom, can I send this over the internet? No, you can't. Should I sign up for these different, they're asking for all this information? No, not unless it's really, really required. Should you be putting in any of that personal information or credit card information or anything, right? So it's really key. Think of yourself as the consumer, and don't always fall to the point of where you think you just need to provide all your information to all these different companies. You do need to be concerned about how they're using your information and where it's being stored and who they're sharing it with.
Absolutely. I think, Joy and Nina, you touched on very great point here, where many companies start focusing on certain compliances only when something happens, right? And I see that day to day also in cyber resilience world, especially around password management. With NordPass, obviously, we talk to customers how to protect their credentials on daily basis. And unfortunately, many of those organizations, doesn't matter if it's small or large, they come to talk around password management only after a breach as such has happened, which exposed the company, right, and their data and made them ill-compliant of legislations itself. So it's worth noting that organizations need to be aware of that and protect the data they have and be compliant around the customer information and data as soon as possible, not before something major has occurred or happened. So I think what's interesting then to move on to from this and to focus on is how to evolve planning and resourcing to fit changing corporate needs in 2023 and beyond, and what tech trends may lead us focus on around implementing certain tools and whatnot.
I think the buzzword of the day is proactive. If you can't use that in your current planning strategy, then you probably need to go back and revisit it. Because if you're just reactive, that means we're only responding to events that have happened. We really do have to be forward thinking. We have to have more of a forecast model when we're talking about the future and resources. Otherwise, we're always going to be going backwards. We're always going to get caught off guard. For instance, anything that's mission critical, especially for this year, those things should already be underway for your organizations. Have you updated your privacy policies? Have you made sure that your vendors are in compliance and with certain, attestations that should have happened by now? Like, all of these things matter, but it definitely takes that forward thinking mentality to get it done. And I will continue to go back to business continuity and disaster recovery. Are those things in place? If they are not, you are strictly just protecting your assets and not your, it's kind of like having homeowners insurance, and you're protecting everything inside of your home, but the house itself is not protected. Doesn't make sense, right? So from a business sense, we can't just protect assets only. We have to consider everything, the bigger picture, the business itself. And if we don't have those protections in place, then what are we really planning for? we're planning to get attacked because we're not planning, you know. And then I think another thing that's going to be important is the cybersecurity awareness training definitely still needs to be elevated because we still continue to see human error accounts for a lot of the data breaches that have happened previously and will continue to do so. And from a compliance standpoint, the effects can be devastating. So we need to, from a forward thinking, make sure that we're incorporating training as we plan ahead as well.
And just to add to that, I think it's important that you have a strategy.
Mhm.
If your company does not have a technology strategy in place that also accommodates compliance, I think that's going to be critical and key. I think it's important to talk about your work culture. You need to collaborate more. You've got to get outside of the box of my space in that silo area. You're going to have to collaborate. I think more teams are going to have to collaborate more with their business partners as well as their security professionals to make sure that we're all working together to achieve the same goal, because there is a lot of overlap, but your business needs to know what's going on as well. And then your security professionals can help you as well from a compliance standpoint, but then compliance can help all of them. I think you definitely need to have that kind of culture. And then going back to what Joyce said, you really have to be proactive. It's hard to change that mindset because you're so used to this is all they've asked for. This is what the request is for. These are the controls that I need to comply with, and I don't have to do anything more than that. Go beyond that, because as things are changing constantly, you see that there are more laws. You should kind of be able to predict, if not look at some of the trends that are going on out there, and you should be able to predict how that will impact your organization and your business, and think about ways that maybe you need to start looking at some other controls that you might need to put in place. Every business is different. Every business is at a different level of maturity. So gauge where you are, and then start to look at what are some other ways that we can not only stay in compliance, but continue to secure our business.
I wanted to
So
add one other thing to what you just said, Dina, if it's okay. It's really quick, I promise. But when you talked about collaboration, I think that's very important when it comes to planning, because there could be some perspectives that we have not considered yet, in terms of
Mhm.
developing strategy. So I would say, let's really look at who we have who has a seat at the table when we're doing these planning and initiatives. Who has a seat at the table? What has or has not been considered, and have we even looked back in history to see what's reoccurring that we still continue to struggle with and need solutions for? Sometimes it does take a new perspective to provide that forward thinking. So I think that's something that's going to be very important when we talk about planning ahead.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because when you really think about it, like if as a security professional, I have a different lens than a compliance professional has a different lens. But even others within that organization, look at your talent across the board. There are
Right.
others that are involved in they're involved in that control or in those processes in some form of fashion, but they can give
Mhm.
some insight in terms
Mhm.
of like what else they're seeing and what their thoughts are. And if you just engage everyone, I mean, I think everybody, then you get more buy-in, right? So going back to the security awareness training, everybody's responsible for it. So get
Mhm.
more people involved in it. Get your organization more involved in it holistically. So
Mhm.
that way everybody has buy-in. Realizes that they're a part of this. And in order for us to achieve our goals, they're part of that. So I mean, I think that's what's just critical, is that everyone needs to be pulled in. Everybody needs to feel a part of it. And everybody's on board.
So to follow up from this, then obviously we focusing on compliances, right, and the shift and change in the world around that. But then, as leaders need to redefine how they become compliant, what technologies then leaders should be looking at to focus on 2023 and beyond, to include in their roadmaps? Anything in particular?
I think we're gonna see, well, I think any technologies that adopt any type of automation for sure. For instance, I use a OneTrust platform. It's a privacy platform, but it combines, ESG, ethics, GRC. It combines all of those things to better help manage compliance and make sure that things are continuous. So I think whatever platforms and technologies are implemented, it should be something that has like that collaborative feel where you're tackling multiple things at one time. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I do still believe that we will see more of an adoption of AI-based tools more mainstream and day to day, especially once we can figure out that balance between how much of we use and to create processes or to help with business decisions and et cetera. So
I would agree with Joy, as I always do, but I think we've made a lot of exactly. I think we've made a lot of great points today. I'm gonna, I'm gonna emphasize again AI and machine learning. I think those are going to definitely be some key ones that we'll use going forward. But I know the struggle with most companies, which is budget, and they don't have the financing to be able to go out and buy these fancy tools. So don't get discouraged. That's one thing. I don't want people to get discouraged and feel like you got to jump in there with some kind of AI or machine learning. It is something that is coming on the horizon, and keep that in mind and maybe add it to your roadmap. But there's still ways that you can utilize. Look at the existing tool sets you have. Compare those tools and understand what are all the different functionality that you have in those tools. A lot of times you forget or you don't realize that you've got this tool that actually has the capability to do additional functionality that will satisfy your needs for the moment, right? So do take some time to really look at your tool sets that you currently have, and then really do some analysis around them to see all the different functionality before you start going out, and then you start to look at other tool sets. Again, everybody has struggles with budget, so I always highly suggest that first, and then you start getting into what are the bells and whistles. But that gives you a better idea of what your requirements are. So then if you got to buy something, this is what I need, and this is why I need it, because these are my requirements. This is what I have to satisfy. But then when you do look at those new tools, also think ahead of what else it can also provide you longer term. So that way it also, you're also prepared for those unexpected things that do come up.
Absolutely. And I think before we move on to the last bit around questions and answers, I just want to outline around, we talked about the data itself, and I just want to outline as well how data is, increasingly strategic asset and required for business-wide approach for the organizations, right? We're talking about management, storage of data, and of course we mentioned the password management of those things. Anything to add? Obviously, I'll mention the importance because I talk about it on a daily basis. So just from my own experience, in IT world itself, in cybersecurity, that disaster recovery, right? Full file and data management, and then cybersecurity around the password management and data credential management. We have a tool, NordPass, for that, where it becomes so significant because so many breaches, around 80% of breaches nowadays, occur due to human touches, right? Meaning that kind of originating from passwords that aren't saved or stored securely. And I see so many organizations still using sticky notes and writing the passwords down and sharing maybe something via an email. So just want to lean how NordPass password management solution itself adds tremendous value to the organizations around the compliances, around making sure that they protect the credentials of their own, even when employees leave, and being able to manage that and own it, because it's a full business tool where you can manage users, you can manage the credentials, see activity logs, share everything completely securely in a complete zero knowledge architecture. And I think last year that opened our eyes around certain breaches of global breaches that happens, right? Even with other vendors in that space itself. And we understand that security and who owns the information is the most important thing. So you as a business owner need to make sure you have tools where you are in control of your data, you are in control of your passwords, and with tool like password management, NordPass, you can, see the vulnerabilities around your passwords, and then 100% know that you are the only owner of the encryption keys into those passwords. So regardless what happens in the industry, your data is fully managed and protected, with the ownership that you have. Especially maybe you might be managing your customers' data, you might be managing your customers' logins and credentials. So password management in terms of NordPass is one of the probably more essential tools, and especially moving into this year and beyond. Actually, I do have quite a few questions also I want to ask. I just want to make sure we have enough time. So we have a question. One of the questions asked around the role of privacy and compliance, risk management, change management, business strategy. So what is the role of that? If anyone want to lean in. So what's the role of privacy, compliance, risk management, change management, business strategy? So it's a very wide question. I know I think we kind of covered it thoroughly. So I don't know if there's anything we want to add around it, but we understand that the role of it's definitely growing on a daily basis, and exposure to it is massive.
I think so. It's such a large question. I was trying to kind of compartmentalize it, but
maybe Joy, maybe to help out, I think of it as those are multiple roles. It's not one, but it's everybody's responsibility. I think what we're seeing more is that now privacy is everybody's responsibility. Security is everybody's responsibility. Compliance is everyone's responsibility. So we all own a piece of that across the board. It's just a lot to manage. And of course, but it changes our way of thinking and doing business now, because internally we've got to think about those things, because we have a responsibility to make sure that we maintain and secure the data of our consumers or our clients.
Yeah. When you take that type of posture, it basically helps with personal accountability. So no longer can we just point the finger at this team or this team. If we're all responsible, we all have a stake in it, then we're working collaboratively for a solution versus just pointing the finger. So
question around crypto and Bitcoin, asking if that method of payment increases data privacy risk.
I believe so. I'm no expert in that space, but from what I understand, that definitely is a huge risk factor in terms of privacy. And there's so much unknown with crypto, though. I know it's been around for a while, but I'm not sure. That's a good question.
Yeah, I'm same with you. I'm not 100%, but I would just say if you're sharing some data, if you're, I mean, it goes back to just those basics. If you're sharing some data, there's the potential for risk. So I would say it definitely does cause for some risk, and definitely an area to explore further.
I think a good question to try quickly maybe jump on is, we have a question around recommendations on how to persuade investment in protecting against black swan events in today's economic downturn. So obviously black swan events are massive sort of downturn events that affecting the economy in a negative way. We've seen many of those. Do you have any recommendations how to persuade investments in that? So I assume that would be within the organizations to raise that topic. Anything to add around that?
I would say when we're talking about budgeting, or like I consider that as part of like budgeting, and if we're talking about investments, we should, when we're talking about investing our internal organizations, whether it's tools, technologies, whatever, let's look at what we're protecting against. Anytime there's a big breach, how do they describe the malicious attackers? They always say, this well-funded organization was able to do X, Y, and Z. They always lead with the fact that they were well-funded. And so we have to adopt that on the business side. How do we make sure that we are also well-funded in order to have countermeasures in place to protect ourselves. I think if we just kind of, and I know it's not that easy just to get money out of the air, because of course the malicious actors, that money is coming from who knows, all types of, places, but it's not, it's just something that we need to think about on how we counteract that.
And I have a question from from Deborah from the audience. Interesting, asking if you have issues that you have addressed with National Archives and Record Administration. So I don't know, I know nothing about it, but anything to, you ever addressed anything with National Archives and Record Administration?
I have not. I'm not sure about you, Joy.
I haven't, no.
Okay, thank you.
I have not.
And I know we're running very short on time. We have a couple questions left. Not sure if we can have time to address those. One interesting one, which actually I would say addresses more of an education to hackers, and maybe this is a valid point to think of, is saying how some people do criminal activities without knowing the damage they make. How can company give this knowledge to hackers? So firstly, I would say is educating the impact that it has on the organization. So I saw interesting statistic how for many small and medium companies itself, hacking an attack, it actually could be crucial, that would lead to the bankruptcy of the organization. So maybe it would go down to the education piece of it as well. I know we're actually out of time. We have a few more little questions, so we'll get back to those. Probably we'll typing out the answers, but closing remarks. I know we're out of time, but anything quickly to add, Dina or Joy, from your side?
Just thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity today to just join you in this conversation, especially with my co-worker here, co-person here, Joy. It's been great, and Gerald, you were awesome.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you, Joy. It was definitely joyful. And Joy.
Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure, and I just piggyback off of what Dina said. It's been a pleasure being on this panel with you, Dina, and Gerald, you as well, for moderating. And my final thoughts would just be, have a posture of readiness, prepare well so that you can set yourself up for success.
Yes.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry running over by a few minutes, but it was my pleasure. Thank you for sharing your vast experience and knowledge with us, Dina and Joy. And hopefully we'll get to talk about these trends again in the near future. And cyber resilience as such, and compliance it needs to be on top of our heads always, especially as we saw Black Swan events keep on happening, and this will continue.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.